A camera is rolling as a young woman breaks down sobbing outside her own home. She's just been told her husband is dead. She crumples, hides her face, clings to her car. And there's only one person on this street who doesn't know the one thing that matters. There is no dead man. The body, the tape, the photographer, the police all around her, all of it is staged, built for an audience of one. Boynton Beach, Florida, the year 2009. 26-year-old Dalia Dippolito, according to investigators, ordered a hit on her own husband, and the hired killer turned out to be an undercover cop. How did the woman who placed the order become an unwilling actress? Why did this case go through court 3 separate times? And what did millions of viewers see on that recording? The morning of August 5th, 2009, in the little town of Boynton Beach, Florida, looks like something dreamed up by the writer of a crime show. Police cruisers with their lights flashing sit outside a beige townhouse on a quiet street. The yard is wrapped in yellow tape. A man with a camera walks around the porch, photographing what's meant to pass for a crime scene. Neighbors peek out from behind their curtains. Everything points to one thing. Something terrible has happened in this house, and someone has just died here. A young woman pulls up to the house. She's 26 years old. Her name is Dalia Dippolito, and only half a year earlier, she got married. An officer meets her at the tape and tells her, "Your husband is dead." The camera records every second of her reaction in close-up. There's just one detail that turns everything upside down. No crime happened here at all. Dalia's husband, Michael Dippolito, is at this very moment alive, well, and sitting in a police station a few minutes' drive away. This entire scene was built by the Boynton Beach Police Department, staged specifically for a single viewer, for Dalia herself. The police here aren't investigating the death of Michael Dippolito because there was no death. They're testing how a woman will behave, a woman who, according to their information, ordered him killed. And the woman performs her grief so hard that this footage will become one of the most famous examples ever of a suspect giving herself away, with no idea that the whole scene around her is a production. But before we can understand why the police staged a fake crime scene outside someone's home, we need to go back a few weeks. Back to the moment when a man walked into the police department with a very strange story. A few days before the August events, a man named Mohammed Shihadeh comes into the Boynton Beach Police. He runs a small business in South Florida, check cashing spots, and a couple of eateries. He's not a criminal, and what he tells them sounds insane even to seasoned detectives. According to him, a woman he's known for a long time, a woman he was once close to, asked him for a terrible favor. She's looking for someone willing to kill her husband. The woman's name is Dalia. According to prosecutors, she didn't come to Shihadeh by accident. She figured a man from the world of cash and shady connections might have the right contacts. But Shihadeh won't go along with it. Instead of finding a hitman, he goes to the police and tells them everything he heard. For the detectives, this is a rare break and a problem at the same time. The word of a single informant isn't enough. If this woman really is plotting a murder, they need evidence that will hold up in court. Recordings, actions, specific dollar amounts. So the police ask Shihadeh to become part of an operation. He agrees to work with investigators and helps reach Dalia in a way that makes it look like everything is going exactly to her plan. From here begins what will turn a domestic drama into a textbook case of undercover work. The police set a trap. Through the informant, Dalia is led to believe the right man has been found, a hired killer ready to do the job for money. In reality, behind that role is a police officer. Every word of the meetings to come will be captured on hidden cameras and microphones. The defense's version will later be very different. The lawyers will argue that Shihadeh made the whole thing up, or blew it out of proportion, that he had a personal grudge, that he manipulated the situation. These arguments will stretch across years of trials. But in the summer of 2009, neither the prosecution nor the defense exists yet. There's only the testimony of one man and the police decision to test it. And there's Dalia, who has no idea yet that she's already under surveillance. While the detectives build their plan, it's worth understanding who exactly ended up at the center of this story. The marriage of Michael and Dalia Dippolito is brand new. They married in early 2009, just 6 months before the events outside the home. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary Florida suburban family. A townhouse, cars, plans for the future. but almost everything about this couple turns out to be more complicated than it seems on the surface. Michael Dippolito is a man with a past. Behind him are run-ins with the law and a reputation as an operator with a questionable business history. Later, in court, he'll be called a convicted con man, and he doesn't hide it. He has money, but he also has debts and a track record of schemes. Dalia, according to the case files, worked before the marriage in a field the press would later write about a lot, and quite eagerly. Her past would become one of those labels that stuck to the case for good. Young, striking, knowing how to make an impression, she connects with Michael fast, and just as fast becomes his wife. Their relationship is shot through with money from the very start. According to prosecutors, money is exactly what becomes the main motive for everything that follows. Michael has savings, around $250,000. There's real estate too. A townhouse worth roughly $225,000. And here's where a detail appears that will later carry special weight in court. Shortly before the August events, this home is signed over so that it becomes the property of Dalia alone. Michael essentially hands a large piece of his property to his wife. Within just days of that, according to investigators, she begins looking for someone to get rid of her husband. Whether that's coincidence or calculation will become one of the central questions in the trials to come. But to understand how it all reached the point of a fake body on the doorstep, we need a closer look at Dalia herself. She got married, but she didn't leave her old life behind. Officially, she's Michael Dippolito's wife, but on the other end of her phone, there's another man, Mike Stanley. According to the case files, she's involved with him, and the messages between them are so explicit that they'll be read aloud to the jury in court as proof of her true intentions. Stanley plays a far bigger role in this story than just a lover on the side. According to prosecutors, he's woven into the financial scheme around the Dippolito household. It's through his involvement, prosecutors allege, that the transfer of the home to Dalia alone gets arranged. In other words, the man she's having an affair with, according to prosecutors, helps set things up so that her husband's real estate ends up in her name only. And around Michael Dippolito at this time, trouble of a different kind starts to gather. Someone calls government agencies and reports that Michael is supposedly back to running illegal financial schemes. For a man with a criminal past, signals like that are doubly dangerous. They threaten to put him back behind bars. According to investigators, these tips may have been part of the pressure on the husband, and the trail, prosecutors suggested, led back to the people around Dalia. The picture the prosecution builds comes out like this. The young wife doesn't just want to leave her husband. She wants to leave while keeping everything, the money, the house, her freedom, and at the same time get rid of Michael himself as a problem. A divorce would have left too many questions and too little upside. Her husband's death, on the other hand, would have solved all of it at once. It's worth keeping in mind that much of this is exactly that, the prosecution's version, assembled later from messages, testimony, and financial documents. Dalia herself never admits guilt at any of the trials, but in the summer of 2009, there are no prosecutors yet on the scene. There's a woman who has a husband, a lover, and a plan all at the same time. And there's a police force that has already plugged its own man into that plan, posing as a hired killer. The first recorded meeting is only days away. On August 1st, 2009, a red convertible sits in an unremarkable parking lot in South Florida. Behind the wheel is a man who presents himself as a hired killer, someone ready to solve another person's problem for cash. In reality, he's a Boynton Beach police officer named Witty Jean. He's working undercover, and the entire conversation that's about to take place is being recorded on hidden equipment. Dalia gets into the car. What happens next will become the central piece of evidence in the case. The woman doesn't laugh it off, doesn't get scared, doesn't back down. She calmly discusses murdering her own husband as if it were a business matter. On the recordings, the supposed hitman asks her point blank whether she's sure about her decision, and Dalia answers that she is sure. She says it firmly, without hesitation. And the line about being 100% certain will be quoted at every trial that follows. It comes down to money, too. They talk about $3,000 in cash for the job, with a possible payment later on. For ordering someone's life ended, the figure is almost mundane, and it's exactly that mundane tone that makes the strongest impression on the jury. Dalia doesn't haggle like a person in desperation. She negotiates like a customer ordering a service. By the time of this meeting, the police already have earlier material as well. recordings in which, according to investigators, the same plans are discussed. But the conversation in the convertible settles everything. It ties the agreement and the payment together on a single tape, one the defense will have almost nothing to counter. There's one more detail in this scene, without which the case would never have become so loud. Around the police in those days, a crew from a popular American reality show about patrol officers is working. The reality project's cameras end up at the scene of the operation. What was originally being filmed as material for entertainment turns into a piece of evidence in a murder-for-hire case. The police get what they wanted, a clear recording of agreement and payment. The final move that remains is to test how Dalia will react when she's told her husband is really dead. For that, the detectives have to stage a performance right outside her home. The move they go for would seem unthinkable in ordinary life. On the morning of August 5th, everything is ready. Michael Dippolito has been warned and is safe, taken to the station, where he learns the chilling truth about what his wife had planned. Outside the townhouse at the same time, there are patrol cars, yellow tape, and a man with a camera playing the part of a crime scene photographer. The neighbors are sure a tragedy has happened. The whole picture looks completely real. Dalia gets a phone call. According to the case, the call comes from a police officer, a sergeant, who asks her to come home from the gym right away. The tone is alarming, the reason left half unexplained. The woman drops everything and drives over. When she pulls up, she's met at the tape. An officer says the line the whole performance was built around, "Your husband has been killed." And then the very scene plays out that millions will later see. Dalia covers her face with her hands, sinks down, makes sobbing sounds, presses herself against the car. Officers steady her, walk her toward a patrol car, keep talking to her. The camera captures all of it, but along with the grief, it also captures what will later work against her. In the prosecution's view, the reaction looks rehearsed, too theatrical, too convenient for the camera, with no real tears. The defense will argue the opposite, that the woman was simply in shock, that under stress people behave strangely, that you can't judge the authenticity of someone's feelings from a single recording. After a short time, the performance ends. Dalia is told that her husband is alive and that she herself is being detained on suspicion of arranging his murder. The act the police put on has done its job. Now investigators have the recordings of the negotiations, the footage of her reaction, and the informant's testimony. What happened on that doorstep will be replayed for a long time to come. But the first to see the recording won't be the jury at all. First, the whole country will see it. First, the footage ends up on that very reality show about patrol officers, whose crew happened to be nearby during the operation. Then, news channels pick up the story. And after that, the video takes on a life of its own, online, racking up millions of views. The fascination with this footage rests on a contrast. The viewer knows what the woman in the recording didn't know. Everything around her is fake. The officers, the tape, the body, all of it a set. And against that backdrop, grief plays out that, in the opinion of the millions who watched, looks like an act. The result is a strange story in which the suspect herself is the one being deceived, and the audience watches a person give herself away without realizing she's walked into a play. The very mechanics of the case add to the attention, too, so perfectly arranged for investigators that to a viewer it almost seems made up. Too much came together in a single point. And for Dalia, it turned into a collapse. The case quickly becomes a media phenomenon. This popularity has a flip side, one the defense would later use as a weapon. Once millions had watched the recording and television played it over and over, finding jurors who had heard nothing about the case and formed no opinion in advance became nearly impossible. The lawyers would argue that the viral video had poisoned the very possibility of a fair trial. A question would also be raised about the police themselves. Why did they effectively hand operational footage over to an entertainment show? Hadn't they turned a serious investigation into a spectacle? These complaints would become part of a larger debate about where the work of an investigation ends and the chase for a dramatic story begins. But all of that is a matter for lawyers and the public. For Dalia herself, viral fame meant one thing. By the time of the first trial, her face was already known across the country, and most viewers had passed their verdict long before the jury did. In 2011, the case reaches the courtroom. The prosecution builds its position on three pillars: the recordings of the negotiations with the supposed killer, the testimony of informant Mohammed Shihadeh, and the footage of her reaction outside the home. The prosecutors lay out a logical chain, a motive in the form of money and real estate, a specific sum for the job, a firm agreement caught on tape, and feigned grief in front of the camera. The defense even then puts forward the version that will follow the case for all the years to come. According to the lawyers, there was no real murder plot at all. Everything that happened was staged, dreamed up to create a sensational clip and break into reality television. By this account, the idea of filming a murder for hire came in part from Michael himself, and Dalia was only playing a role, knowing she was being recorded. This version doesn't convince the jury. The recordings, in which the woman calmly confirms her intent and names a price, outweigh the story about a non-existent show. Dalia is found guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. The sentence turns out to be harsh. The judge hands down 20 years behind bars, and it's during the sentencing that words are spoken that will later be repeated in every report about the case. The judge gives what happened an extremely harsh moral judgment. That judgment becomes firmly attached to the case, shaping the image of a calculating woman who ordered a hit. You'd think the story was over. A young wife who tried to get rid of her husband for money got what was coming to her. But in the American justice system, a guilty verdict isn't the end. A convicted person has the right to appeal, which means there's a chance a higher court will find errors in the process. And such errors are found. The appeals court's attention is drawn not to the question of whether Dalia is guilty, but to how exactly the trial was conducted. At the center of the dispute is the jury selection procedure, something technical, but in court critically important. It's that procedure that will overturn a case that seems settled and send it back to square one. Digging into that procedure, the appeals court concludes that the first trial was conducted with a violation. By law, the selection of those who will decide a person's fate has to be flawless. Otherwise, the entire verdict is thrown into doubt. The flaw they find turns out to be serious enough for the verdict to be overturned. For Dalia, this means an almost unbelievable turn. The 20-year sentence is annulled. The guilty finding no longer stands. The case goes back to the beginning. She'll have to be tried all over again, as if the first trial never happened. The woman the country had already mentally locked away for 2 decades is once again given the presumption of innocence. While the new trial is being prepared, Dalia walks out from behind bars under strict conditions. She's placed under house arrest, living in her mother's home, under supervision, with no right to move about freely. Formally, she remains a defendant on a serious charge, but physically, she returns to something resembling a normal life. And it's in this strange, suspended period that something happens that adds yet another human layer to the case. Under house arrest, while awaiting a retrial, Dalia begins a new relationship. Another man enters her life, and from that relationship, she is expecting a child. The result is a contrast that's hard to believe. A woman accused of trying to arrange the death of her own husband for money and freedom, while awaiting trial on that very charge, is building a new family and preparing to become a mother. For the prosecution, this only confirms how coldly she's able to separate her own life from the gravity of the accusation. For the defense, it's the opposite. The image of an ordinary woman who long ago had the label of a ruthless criminal pinned on her. So, the case comes to its second trial in an entirely different climate. Years have passed, the viral video has been replayed countless times, and the accused herself has had a son. And the question that seemed settled back in 2011 must once again be put to a new panel of jurors. The second trial takes place in 2016, years after the events on the doorstep. In that time, the defense has sharpened its line of attack. Now the lawyers strike not only at the reality show theory, but at the Boynton Beach police themselves. They call the police's actions predatory, argue that the operation was built around a dramatic story, that the crew of an entertainment show turned an investigation into a spectacle, and that Dalia was effectively pushed into saying the words that were later turned against her. The prosecution holds to its old foundation, the recordings. The words spoken in the red convertible haven't gone anywhere, and the prosecutors press on the main weak point of the show theory. There isn't a hint on the tape that Dalia knew about the cameras or was playing a part. But this time, the jury doesn't reach a single conclusion. Their votes split. Some are convinced of her guilt, some aren't. Despite all the recordings and footage, the panel reaches an impasse and can't deliver the unanimous verdict that the law requires on a serious charge. The judge is forced to declare a mistrial. It's neither an acquittal nor a conviction. It's a legal draw. The case simply isn't carried through to a verdict because the people in the deliberation room couldn't agree. For Dalia, this means she still hasn't been found guilty a second time, but she isn't free either. The charge hasn't gone anywhere. The mistrial says a lot about the strength of the defense. The staging theory and the complaints against the police turned out to be persuasive enough to plant doubt in at least some of the jurors. What looked in 2011 like obvious guilt had now split the room in two. The prosecution is left with a choice: back off or try again. The prosecutors decide not to give up. The case of Dalia Dippolito heads to a third trial, and it's this one that will have to deliver the ending the previous two couldn't. In 2017, the Dalia Dippolito case comes to court for a third time. By now, all the arguments have long been known to both sides. The defense again leans on the theory of a staged event and entrapment by the police. And the prosecution, as before, stakes everything on that tape from the convertible, the single piece of evidence that, in 8 years, no one had managed to counter. Among the witnesses is Michael Dippolito himself. The ex-husband, a man with a criminal past that isn't hidden at the trial, testifies about how what happened affected his life. He says his wife's attempt to get rid of him essentially destroyed his existence. For the jury, this is the voice of the supposed victim, the one for whose money, according to prosecutors, the whole thing was set in motion. Dalia herself does not testify in her own defense. She doesn't take the stand to give the jury her own version. The decision to stay silent is her right, but it leaves the last word to the recordings and the prosecution's witnesses. And this time, the result is starkly different from the second trial that split the room. The jury deliberates briefly. According to the case, they reach a verdict in about an hour and a half, lightning fast by the standards of charges like these. Dalia is found guilty of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. After the verdict is read, the judge orders her taken into custody right there in the courtroom. Years of house arrest, relationships, and motherhood end in an instant. The woman whose face the whole country knew from the viral video becomes a convict once more, this time, it seems, for good. The question of punishment remains. After the first trial, she was given 20 years, but that sentence was overturned. Now, after the third trial, the term has to be set anew. And although guilt has been established, the final punishment will turn out to be lighter than what was handed down in 2011. The story that passed through a courtroom 3 times finally moves toward its resolution, but with a number that will surprise many who followed the case. The final sentence comes out shorter than the first. Instead of the 20 years pronounced in 2011, Dalia Dippolito gets 16. 4 years less, but still a long term for a crime in which the victim stayed alive and unharmed only because the hired killer was a police officer from the very start. She's sent to serve her sentence in a women's correctional facility in Florida. The case doesn't go quiet legally even then. The defense keeps fighting, trying to win another review, to challenge the process, to cast doubt on both the police's work and the admissibility of certain evidence. These efforts stretch on for more years, but the foundation of the prosecution holds. The state's highest courts ultimately reject the attempts to break the guilty verdict. 3 trials, appeals, and motions did not undo the main thing. That tape outlived them all and outweighed everything else. In the Dalia Dippolito case, the argument in essence is about one thing: how to understand what happened. Almost no one disputes the facts themselves. There were meetings, there was an agreement, there was money, there was a fake crime scene, and a reaction on camera. What differs is the interpretation. For the prosecution, it's the cold calculation of a young wife who decided to turn her husband into a line item of expenses. For the defense, it's a provocation blown up by the police and a botched performance for the sake of a dubious dream of television. A special place in this story belongs to its strange, almost cartoonish mechanism. A woman who hired a cop, a police force that staged someone's death, the crew of an entertainment show that happened to be standing nearby, a video that made the woman famous before she was ever convicted. All of it turned a domestic drama about money and betrayal into one of the most recognizable stories in American crime television. Michael Dippolito survived. Dalia is serving her sentence. Her son, born after the collapse of the marriage, is growing up without any choice in which story he was brought into the world. And the recording from that August morning still lives online, a short clip of a woman mourning the very man a court found her guilty of plotting to kill.